My name is Ora Carr. My parents were Mary Brown Samilton and William F. Samilton. My parents were not high school graduates, but they were very much into education. Um, they always stressed the importance of it, and as did their friends. Um, at an early age, we had to, as a child, I had to read the paper as much as I could. I did, and I had to read the news and always the sports. You couldn't leave the sports out. To me, at that time, sports didn't mean very much, but that was the one thing that Black people participated most in. And whether you knew the athletes or not, you had to know the names and what sport they played. We also had to listen to the weather forecast. And as a child, I wasn't all that interested in listening to it. I just was taking it day by day. But I found that since I've grown up, that those were important things to know about because athletics gave our first recognition, and by being aware, like Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson, and people of that caliber, it meant that you were aware of some of what was going on in the world.
Why do you think your parents thought it was important that you learn how to read?
Oh, because if you could read, you could go anywhere in your reading and you could do so many things. You could use your imagination.
And how did that help you?
Oh, that helped me tremendously because you can have your own fantasy. And we all did have our fantasies. We could be poor or rich, it didn't matter. But we had a choice when we used our imagination. My, One of my fantasies was to become a teacher once I'd grown up. And I remember I had a teacher, Miss Hoodie, who really was quite influential in my life as a youngster. Um, I admired her so much, and she would always talk with me about some of the things that you would experience in life. And I guess I was considered an old lady before my time because I visited the older people and sat and talked with them um, an awful lot. So the knowledge that I have, I got mostly by visiting the older citizens of Mooresville. They would share information nobody else was interested in, seemingly. And I could use that information to help me make decisions, even as after I had grown up. It has meant an awful lot to me because I still make decisions based on information that I received when I was younger. And sometimes, as parents, we don't understand younger people, not because they are really active themselves, but because we just don't listen. And I try to be a good listener. When they share information with me, it becomes ours because they may not want everybody to be aware of what they're going through. And as I say, I was an old woman in a young body.
Why was it important to you to talk to older people when you were young?
You know, I just wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to try and understand it. But it takes time to get where you need to go and where you want to go. And if I talk with the older people, that helped because I could only go so far. They would only tell me so much and then cut it off. They tell me what they want as much as they wanted me to know.
Can you tell me the names of some of the older people that you used to talk to and some of the things you used to talk to them about?
There was a lady, Mrs. Geneva Miller, who was the Burt Miller, Geneva Burt Miller, who was a teacher, and she was a good storyteller. She was an actress really in disguise, but she could really entertain. And she shared her life with all of us younger people, all of us children. She was a local person, and she cared and shared what she experienced with the younger people. And that meant an awful lot. And I was a good listener, I think. I remember she would pick up children if something important was going on and take us to whatever it was, no matter what. If it was not that far away, she would put us in her car and take us. I remember when I was very young, I don't remember exactly what age, but it was between 9 and 11 that Mrs. Roosevelt was speaking at Livingstone College, and she gathered a group of children and took them to Salisbury over to Livingstone to hear Mrs. Roosevelt. And she would do things like that. And she would do plays to make you use your imagination. Sometimes she would write them herself. But anyway, she kept us entertained. And she always encouraged all of us to continue our education, not to um, stop where we were, but to keep going. And she was very good about that. So were most of the people who did um, go on and do the work in life that they wanted to. I remember a lady, Miss Janie Goodman, who just passed at the age of 102, I think. This year or last year, she became a nurse, and she lived in Richmond, Virginia, I believe, but she passed away. And that lets you know that many of the people who were here had very successful lives. They owned their own homes, and the communities were not all white. There were a few of the black people living in many of the so-called white communities. They were mixed communities. I guess it was just because everybody minded their own business and everybody knew how to make um, contributions, and they did so. Every adult was your parent when I was a child. We wonder today about correction children when they are on the wrong track. But during that time, you could correct anybody's child because parents felt like you were going to tell them or lead them in the right way. But today, it's not like that. You don't interfere. You just let children go about doing whatever they want. And sometimes they make decisions for the adults, which is not a good thing, but it's something that you try hard to learn to live with. Not because you like it or you want it, but because that's just the way the world is today. I remember as my mother was a very strict disciplinarian. And I knew if I didn't do the right thing or if I didn't listen to any adult who tried to correct me, I was in trouble. So I tried to do the best I could. And it pretty much worked. But Today is different. You try to learn to live minding your own business. And if anyone needs your help, if they ask for it, you might give it, but you don't interfere.
What's your first memory of going to school?
I remember going to school. I was an only child, and there was a family of 3 kids, and they lived near me and would always pick on me. So they were really bullies until one of my neighbors started paying more attention to me and stepped in and let them know that she was there, and if they bothered me, they were going to have to bother her. So I learned not to pay too much attention to them. But all of these things are not new that are happening today. They have just gotten out of control because we as parents are not doing what we should. And that's a very, very wrong thing to do.
Can you tell us how parenting has changed over the years?
Well, over the years, when you would speak, no matter whose child it was, you knew to listen and to take the advice if you were wise. Because if you got punished, if you didn't get punished much by that person, you were going to get punished by your parents. And that's not the way it is today. The children are in charge more than the parent. And that's just not a good thing. We shouldn't be taking advice, not certain kind of advice from the children. We should be living so we would have it, we would not have to say anything, but maybe just look and they'd get the message, but that doesn't happen today. So you just leave it alone. I remember there were no Black guidance counselors. So the guidance counselor from senior high would come to Dunbar. And this particular year, they gave us a test. This our young white instructor came and gave us a test. I don't remember what grade I was in. But then after the test had been checked, I don't know what my score was, nor anyone else's, but I know either my score was my score had to have been in the top, although I didn't know what it was, because in a few days, when the test came back, I remember Mr. Woods had me come to his room, and he was doing something. This young man who had done the testing um, was there, and I could think for myself. So I just assumed either I had made the top score or I had scored high because that man wanted to know who I was. I don't know anything else about the testing but that. So after he had talked with me, my parents didn't get any information. And I didn't get any information except, let's see, Mr. Woods, I think, asked me how I felt about something. I don't remember exactly how the question was asked, but it gave me the idea that perhaps I had been in the top group. Um, Even though we had those hand-me-down books with not very much information, with no information about us. But to be sharecroppers and second-class citizens, really, that's what it amounted to. But I always tried to not confront anybody, but to have peace and to do the best I could to have whatever was going on become better. And I'm sure that's the way all of us were taught.
What encouraged you to pursue your career?
I wanted my friends as well as everybody else to make a decent contribution to the world, or at least to the community. Because we were not getting what we needed to have gotten. We were not being exposed to, and we were not being told the truth about much of what was happening in the world. Reading was the key, and that's why education was important to me. And my parents didn't get the education, but they tried to make sure that I did the best I could, and they made sure that whatever I had, I could share, and I should share, and I should never look down on anybody else because my my friends may not have had what I had, and I didn't have what they had, but no matter what, we had what they could give us. And all we could do was use what they had given us and do the best we could with it.
So what did you do?
I became a teacher. I went after I had been to Livingstone College as a kid. I went back to Livingstone and got a degree in early childhood education, the grammar grades, because at that time the divisions in the universities and colleges were different than they are now. But if I could help someone come out of that rut and improve, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help anybody I could to do the best that they could and to make a contribution.
So tell us about some of your experiences at Livingstone College.
Well, I at Livingstone, I got a, I think I'm easy to get along with. So I had friends, great people, who were making greater contributions, were going to be able to make greater contributions than I was, and I wasn't jealous. I was just glad to see them move on and move up. Um, I I never thought I was better than anyone else. I knew that um, no matter what, I was one of God's children, and that I could do the best I could, and that would be all I could do. But I didn't have to be jealous of everyone else who were able to, who was able to do and achieve greater things than I could. But if I could just help to do some little something, that was really what I wanted. I didn't have to be a big anything, but all I needed to do was just do the best I could.
So what was your first job after graduating?
My first job, I never changed school system after graduation. Um, I went to work in Iredell County, and I worked in Iredell County until I retired, 31 years. But they gave me a chance, and I did what I could to help children grow. I knew that some children would never leave their communities, never, to go any place else, to live any place else. And so I tried to bring in things to help them experience some of the things that they were not going to experience there. I remember I used to we had parties, and I remember this junior 8th grade group could not everybody who couldn't dance. Well, I took time out to make sure everybody could dance. I took time to make sure that whatever was needed, each student had. I remember we had a party, and I don't remember the name, but this little high school group had formed a band, and we had an activity, and this little band played for us. So everybody had to participate. Nobody was left out because we made sure. I would work. Um, I would go back. Stay after school. I would shampoo some of the young. I didn't shampoo it. I asked them to get their hair shampooed at home, and I would try to do it after school, and I would take them home after school. And I remember I didn't sew all of that well, but I remember having them get um, fabric and making outfits for them. Um, not not anything real flashy, but if you could sew, if you could buy a blouse at that time with just $1 to buy you one of those blouses that had elastic in it, and you could get a blouse, and I would help you make the skirt if necessary. So whatever we had, you could participate in and not feel left out.
While you were teaching, do you remember some of your students and
Oh,
their
yes.
names?
Yes, I remember a lot of them.
Can you tell us some of their names and some of the things that you remember with them?
Gail Hoover, who passed away not long ago. Ruth Reed, Faye Thomas, um, um, Linda Winford, many others.
And can you tell us some stories? Do you remember a story about Ruth Reed?
So would you repeat that?
Do you remember anything about Ruth Reed? You had mentioned her name.
Yes. Personality. She had a good personality. Always a pleasant child. And did what she could to help others. And I think Ruth became a music. I believe she's a music teacher. Anyway, I think she's in music somehow. And I'm not sure, but anyway, I think she's a teacher. All of them didn't go to school. I remember, but they all, many of them became good citizens, and that was the main thing.
What's something that is the best memory from teaching?
That's what.
What's one of your best memories from teaching?
When I would see, I remember one year, this young lady checked out with the highest average in the class, and she was a seventh grader. And she was an eighth grader. going to go to junior high. As we had been, at that time, we didn't have the divisions in schools like they are now. But she was the top in her class, and she didn't want to be the valedictorian, but she had to make a speech. And it took her family and anyone else, basically family, to get her to the place she really wanted to participate and deliver that address. She was the one with the highest ranking score. So she did it. And she did it well. So
Do you remember your last day as a teacher?
my last day. Not my last day. Let's see.
Or maybe something from your last year as a teacher?
My last year. Well, I didn't only get along well with my classes, but I got along well with the students, period. I would talk with any of them without trying to be their homeroom teacher. I never tried to think I knew more than anybody else. I just wanted to help.
So you was telling us about special ed. How did that come about?
Special ed was new. And I went to, that summer, I decided I was going to go take a class, and I went to A&T. And I started realizing that you had to really look at, I realized more that you had to look at the child individually. No two were alike. And you had to plan. Since we didn't really have special ed, I just took a group of students who I knew couldn't master the regular class processes of doing things. And I looked at different ways that you could do things to help them, to help those who couldn't. And so that's what I did. I tried to find different ways. Even if I had to have a group, I had groups. And sometimes I would have a group. They weren't always they weren't in the same books, always. But to make sure that the students could participate, because it was so new then, I would read to this group of children. and the other class members would read for themselves because I found that some of them could explain it after you had read it to them, but they couldn't read it. And that was a hard thing. And um, I um, I knew that I had to find ways to help them. Some of them didn't count well, but I found a way that could help them um, count well, and they were surprised themselves.
How did that make you feel to watch their progress?
Oh, it made me feel good. I felt good about it. I just wanted to find more ways to help them. I've always tried to help. You don't always get credit for trying to help. Sometimes you get put down very badly. But just because you could do it doesn't mean that everybody else can. And it doesn't mean that that person's dumb either. It just means they can't handle the way it's the way you're doing it.
Can you tell us how Mooresville has changed from when you were
Okay,
a
now
kid?
I attended school in Mooresville, but I never worked in Mooresville. Um, we used to get those little nasty used books and try and do the best we could. But there was nothing that uplifting about us. It's always about the other person or the other race.
Do you think it was difficult trying to teach when it was about one race and not the other?
You know, no, state your question again.
Do you think it was hard to teach when the information was about one race than the other?
Well, it was hard because you understood what was going on. That's what made it so hard. But then you try to find different ways to help your own. Because I'm one of the people that was not getting the information about my people. And that made it difficult for me. But being a good listener is very, very important. But you'd be surprised. And you find ways, it may take a while, but you can find ways. I found ways that I could help many of my students.
What's one of the most rewarding things you found as a teacher?
Seeing someone succeed
And why did that make you feel so good?
because they had made it. They had decided to pull themselves out of the rut and do something. You got to do it. You got to do things for yourself. That's the only way you can improve. You can't depend on somebody else. You got to do it yourself. When I would see them try and they make one little step, that made me very proud.
What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
Mm, just that I tried to help everybody I could. I never do anything expecting a return. I do it because it's the right thing and I'm going to do it. Not because I'm expecting something in return.
How do you feel about the future?
It's very grim. An awful lot is going to have to happen. People are going to have to search, really search themselves to see what they can do. Not to anyone else, but what can I do to me to get out of this rut that I'm in. So I can make a better contribution, not because of someone else.